Hello everyone, welcome to a series on environmental history. Today is about coral bleaching. But before we dive deeper, let me just mention that forest is currently under concurrent list. Earlier it was in state list, and also you read about Article 48A, 51A Clause G, which are termed as like the constitutional provisions regarding the forest conservation. That is the fundamental duty and the directive principles of state policy. They are basically. So you just study about them and you either comment article what is 48A or 51A clause G in the comment section. Okay. So with regards to coral bleaching, why it was in news, you can just mention as to why it was in news. So widespread coral bleaching has been seen along the Indian coast. Okay. I can mention, along the Indian coast, along Lakshadweep, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, along the Indian coast across Lakshadweep, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Gulf of Mannar. So widespread coral bleaching is seen along the Indian coast across these areas. Okay, along Gulf of Mannar and Park Bay. Of course, so here we have the Lakshadweep, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and then you can mention, I won't draw it properly, just a rough sketch. So Gulf of Mannar, Park Bay, like if you look at the map once, you'll understand. So widespread coral bleaching has been seen across Lakshadweep, Andaman Nicobar Islands, Gulf of Mannar and Park Bay. So specifically with regards to Lakshadweep, coral atolls, there I'll explain about coral atolls in detail, but for now understand that when you say coral atolls, if time permits, if it is needed, I'll just mention about coral atolls separately. But when you say coral atolls, they're basically formed by the submerged like remnants of volcano actually. So whatever the submerged remnants, the remaining parts or the leftovers of the volcanoes are there, from that this coral atolls are basically formed. So within this Lakshadweep, basically Acropora muricata. This is one species of corals, and there is Porides, Acropora muricata and Porides cylindrica. So I'll explain what is coral bleaching. So these two species have undergone widespread coral bleaching. Along with that, even more stress tolerant corals, that is Porides lutea, and one other species, I guess it is Porides lutea, is the most stress tolerant corals. This also led to more, it was also more bleached, more coral bleaching took place within this species also actually. And there is other variety which is more stress tolerant, that is Pavona varians, okay, within Lakshadweep. So within Gulf of Mannar, you can mention that the coral bleaching, that the live coral cover reduced from 37% to 27.37%, okay, from 2025 to 2021. And with regards to, especially within Goa, one species called as I am unable to recall the name of the species. I think it is Goniopora. I'll just check it and I'll get back to you in tomorrow's class. It also undergone coral bleaching, okay. So with regards to corals and coral bleaching, so basically what are corals? So basically corals are made up of thousands of tiny marine organisms called as polyps. So they are basically soft-bodied organisms, but within corals there are hard corals and I'll just mention hard corals and soft corals. So these hard corals have an exoskeleton. They have a skeleton which is made up of calcium carbonate actually. So it is also referred to as calcareous skeletons. Okay, so these corals are basically made up of these tiny marine organisms. So what happens is, how these corals or coral reefs are formed is like these polyps, they basically belong to the phylum Nitria. So phylum, when you say phylum, it is below kingdom above the class. So basically the kingdom is Animalia, and they belong to the phylum Nitria. Okay, so what happens is these polyps, they attach to hard surfaces as rocks. So they get attached to this, like imagine this is a hard surface, they get attached to this hard surfaces as rocks, and these skeletons, when these polyps die, these skeletons are left over this rock surface. Again, on this exoskeleton, new polyps grow. So again, when these die, the exoskeletons are left over. So the same process repeats for millions of years, and that is what leads to formation of coral reefs. And the world's largest coral reef, that is 2,300 kilometers long, is the Great Barrier Reef. Of the northeast coast of Australia. So this is how coral reefs are formed actually. And sometimes these coral reefs can also turn into islands also. For example, Lakshadweep. So you can mention these coral reefs can also turn into islands. Example, Lakshadweep. So when you say coral polyps, as I have mentioned, they are basically tiny organisms. So within these polyps, within the tissues of these polyps, they have, within tissues you can write, within tissues they have an algae called as zooxanthellae. So these zooxanthellae are what gives color. They are of different forms, different colors, gives color to the corals. So these corals and zooxanthellae are in symbiotic relationships. That means both the corals and zooxanthellae benefit, in the sense they have that win-win situation or win-win relationship. How is, like, what happens is these polyps have zooxanthellae, right? So and these zooxanthellae use corals their color. So basically what happens is these zooxanthellae, they get their they get a space for living on these corals. Along with that, what happens is through the process of photosynthesis, these zooxanthellae, you can mention through the process of photosynthesis, what they provide is, they provide energy to corals. Okay. So as I have mentioned here, these polyps are attached to this hard surface. So these exoskeletons, like this, the corals are formed, right? So along with that, this zooxanthellae, they'll get the nutrients. I mean, they get a space. They get, as you can mention, as it is like a habitat for them. Or also they get sufficient nutrients also as well from the corals. Okay, you understood, right? Basically what happens is these polyps, they attach to the hard surfaces, the skeletons are left over. So the skeletons left over, skeleton, what forms this coral reefs? Millions of years it repeats. So basically within these polyps, they have the zooxanthellae, which gives color to this. Otherwise they become transparent when the zooxanthellae. So they give color to these corals. Along with that, since the zooxanthellae are attached, so the photosynthesis process takes place, because within this polyps only they have this zooxanthellae. So what happens, because of the process of photosynthesis, these corals get their energy. Along with that, these corals are getting the space to, it's like providing a habitat. Okay, you understood, right? Along with that, when you say nidria, so basically it comes from a Greek word called as nide, which means the stinging nettle. These organisms have that stinging nettle, like in order to catch the prey, in order to protect themselves. Okay, so the jellyfish, the sea anemones, hydra, foraminifera, you can just Google them. When you see the images, it will be more clear actually. So all of those belong to this phylum only, Nitria. So with regards to the coral reef bleaching, I mean, they're usually found in shallow waters, marine waters. Salty has to be 32 to 42 ppt, and temperature of around warm temperature, that is around 23 to 29 degrees centigrade. Okay, so with regards to the causes for coral bleaching, what happens is when coral bleached, so if there is a healthy coral, if it is a healthy coral, the zooxanthellae is attached. So if it is a stressed coral, what happens is the zooxanthellae becomes toxic. This is how coral bleaching takes place. So once it leaves, it becomes coral bleaching action. So it is healthy coral, it is stressed coral. The bleaching of coral takes place once the zooxanthellae leaves. It becomes dead. It is unable to recover. Like it once becomes. So the zooxanthellae lives. It leads to coral bleaching, and if it continues, the coral becomes dead. It becomes unable to recover actually. So after coral bleaching, it becomes a dead coral. It is in a stage unable to recover. So coral bleaching basically is like a stress response, you can say, to events like global warming, climate change actually. I mean, because of global warming, marine heat waves, increase in temperature. Global warming is increasing. So marine heat waves is also one of the major reasons which is leading to global coral bleaching. So one of the major causes include increase in temperature, exposure to sunlight, overexposure to sunlight, then runoff and pollutants, and also low tides. So increase in temperature disturbs the healthy corals, or exposure to sunlight cause they need that warm temperature. Also when you say runoff is basically like the water which flows from land into the water, carries with it pesticides, fertilizers, and other toxic substances with it. So when this enters the corals bleach. With regards to pollutants, it can be because of oil spills, toxic chemicals from industries, or it can be, here you can add also sediments, because the water will not be clear. When they carry sediments, the water will not be clear enough for sunlight exposure. Actually, the time is up. I'll discuss the rest in the next class. Thank you. Stay tuned for more updates.